Hey all, so today's video is going to be a painting video. We're just going to throw together some abstract studies and play around with paint and play around with color. I wanted to make more of a painting video because the last few videos that I've made have been solely focused on the behind the scenes work, finding inspiration and doing art business tasks and managing those things. So I wanted to release a little creative energy and actually paint something today with you guys. What we're gonna do today is actually make 3 different studies. I have 3 pieces of canvas that I had cut out. Each of these are about 10 inch by 10 inch. And then I have some 8-inch square pieces of paper as well. Now this is a handmade paper that I got on Etsy. I can share the link if you want to see where I got this. I don't know too much about it. I can't say that I'm a watercolor paper expert, but it is cool paper and I like working on it. It seems to hold up really well. So those are kind of the surfaces that we're going to paint on today. The second thing that I've done, and this is actually one of my favorite tools to search for color inspiration. This is a book called Palette Perfect. This is the volume 2. I probably use this one primarily for some reason, but both are absolutely amazing and I cannot recommend them more. Anybody who ever asks me, I always tell them, go buy these 2 books. They're amazing. I chose to go with 3 different color palettes because I have 3 different sets of paper and canvas here. And the first one here, I really wanted to play around with some blues. I've had quite a few people recently kind of reach out asking about commissions in blues. And honestly, I don't really work in these tones of like watery kind of sky blues and light blues and soft blues. So I really wanted to play around with that. So that's what this is. Now, I really love this book because it gives some reference photos and some different photos that you can use as inspiration. So that's that one. The next palette that I chose out of this book is here. So I'll show you that. This palette, it's got a lot of orange and some more of these, almost like a mix between cobalt blue and like a purplish blue. So there's also some green in here, some pink, and then, you know, some of these camel-y colors. So this is a really cool palette. And again, I absolutely love this reference photo. It kind of makes it to where you can see how the colors will go together in a painting and you can kind of use that in a way to build your composition. My next set of colors were actually inspired by a Pinterest post. The post is actually a picture of a painting and it was pulled from a blog. I don't know who the original artist is, so I can't necessarily credit them, but I will link the post below. The inspiration behind this isn't that I'm gonna copy this artist's work, it's that I liked the color palette. In the image, you'll see that there are some gradients to it. So a lot of my work does have some mixtures of colors where there's gradients, but I'm kind of focusing on that top half of the image where there was some teal into yellow into orange. And then my plan is on top of that, I will also add some of those purples and magentas as my mark making colors. Then for mark making tools, I have everything from my huge collection of acrylic markers to oil pastels to other paints that I will share as I start to layer those on top once that first layer dries. So let's get started. I'm gonna flip the camera down so you can see what I'm doing, and then we'll just get to painting. So the first color palette that I was going to start with is this blue color palette. The first part of this is just gonna be me putting down the very first layers. So these are really watery layers. We're going to mix a lot of water with our paint with this little tiny whisk. We'll let that dry, and then the second part of this video is going to be us putting on all the marks and the more textured paints and things like that on top. So we're starting with this blue palette. Again, this has like a lot of really nice grayish blues. So I've got my colors And I've got, you know, kind of a deep gray blue, kind of a powder blue, this brown raw umber color, and then some gray to even deepen some of the grays in these blues. And then I'm gonna mix some of that with white and a lot of water, and we're gonna get started on this one first. I'm gonna lay the bottom layer on each of these paintings first, and we'll go through each of the color sets one by one, mostly just because I'm gonna be mixing the colors one by one. So I'll do the blues and this color palette on this canvas, and then I will move on to the paper. We'll set those aside, let them dry, and we'll move on to the next color and keep going. That's the process. I think I want to start with this grayish blue though. So not a ton of paint in there. I do want to mix some of this gray, if it'll come loose. And then I'm just gonna start to mix that together. You can see how, if you can see, it sort of deepened the blue just a little bit more. And then I am going to slowly add some water. So we want this pourable, and you could certainly use like a pouring medium, but those tend to have a lot of shine to them, and I don't want it to really sit on top of the canvas. I really want it to kind of mix in the canvas. And the other key tip, and we may not use that this time, is that I tend to like to mix my paints and then let them sit for a little while, so you don't get, you see these little bits of paint that are kind of still floating around. That way you don't get that. You could certainly mix your paint first with like an airbrush medium and thin it out and then add water. That's a really good way to go. Or even your pouring medium and then add water. It kind of helps it mix with the water a little faster. But we're not gonna do that. So first color down, and I'm gonna kind of let it pour from a higher spot because I really like the way that it lands. And we're just gonna dump the rest there. And you can kind of run your fingers through it. If you want to use like a catalyst wedge, you certainly can. And I'm leaving some of how it just like naturally fell and poured, but I'm also kind of tapping in some of it for it to get a lot more of that splatter effect. Taking some of it to the edge. Like if this was a stretched canvas, I would definitely utilize, you know, the edge. And the idea here is to kind of start to think about your composition. Well, let's go in with that lighter color. So this is a powder blue. And this one I am going to mix with white. Before I do that, because I forgot to save some of this paint that I mixed, is I'm going to pour some of this onto the paper piece. It changes the look of this piece just a little bit, but I'm okay with it. This is the catalyst wedge. You could use even just a scrap piece of paper or just about anything, but it allows you to kind of scrape some of the paint around. I think I splatter that a little bit. I think I like the way that that looks. We'll set that to the side and continue on. Actually, why don't we do them together? Okay, so I've got my powder blue here, and I actually kind of want more white than blue in this because I want it to be really light. I want there to be some contrast to this darker blue that I just laid down. A little less water this time. Mix that together. And you almost want like a real nice consistency mixed before you continue to add more water in. I kind of messed up the first time, so. And now you'll get, this will actually mix with water a lot better. And again, we're just pouring. We're gonna pour and start to kind of move some of it around. You'll notice the paper and we want that to mix, but you'll notice the paper is starting to kind of bubble up. You'll notice that the canvas will kind of start to get some waves in it, and that's okay. Kind of ran out of paint here. One thing that I'll do to get like the extra paint out the spray inside. I usually just kind of spray it and hold, but it looks like I've got some still really in here. These little containers I just get from like the dollar store. And well, that kind of took over, didn't it? Really don't want this to go over the edge of the paper, but you know, it's gonna do its own thing. And I'm not trying to let this light blue take over this entire painting, so I am going to sop some of that up. Last color, this raw umber. I'm not going to use as much of this, so it's really just kind of more of an accent color. The thing about the paper too is that as it starts to kind of bubble up from the moisture of the paint, things will start to flow out to the outsides. So I'm going for smaller bits of burnt umber, raw umber. Raw umber. I can't seem to remember that. Kind of like that. And then here I'll be a little more wild with it. And again, just soak up where there's like way too much water. So we're gonna set these aside. Try not to disrupt them too much. Okay, I got those other ones out of the way. And the other color palette that I got out of this book is this one. We've got a lot of almost cobalt type blues, some real light pinks, some almost like a yellow ochre sort of color, like orangey browns, and again with some grays. I had pulled out these three colors. I'm thinking now I'm gonna swap this gray purple out for cobalt. Okay, so this is a cobalt blue. I'll probably mix in a little bit of maybe a tinge of gray, definitely a little white. This color is actually pretty dark, so I might also lighten this a little bit. And then this color might need a little gray as well to kind of just tone down the bright pinkness of it. But these are the three colors we're working on with our next set. So I've got the gray handy, and then this is an inexpensive white paint that I get on Amazon. It has a pump to it, that's why I like it. So I'll be mixing a lot of these with the white. Let's start with the darkest color first. I honestly don't think I'm gonna go as watery with this. And this is like a dark teal green. Matte acrylics by Blick are really good for mixing with water. And I lied. I'm going to use just as much water, if not more, because that is a thinner paint. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? Pouring on some of that. Okay. Whoa. I think that's good. Let me get that paper out of the way. Let's get some of that blue in there. The teeniest bit of this gray and the teeniest bit of this white. It's still a nice bright blue, but that just like definitely toned down a lot of like the real brightness of it. Okay. And this was more of the consistency that I was looking for before. I'm just gonna go there. And then here's where I'll take my spray bottle. And I like when these colors sort of mix, they touch, And by the time you get to the point where they dry, they've sort of mixed and touched a whole lot. I'm just getting my finger kind of wet and watering down some of these areas so the paint will kind of bleed into that. And then for this, like that. I kind of like that. Do you see how much differently I work on paper than I do on like the canvas? I tend to leave a lot of white space because if you want to frame a piece of the paper, sometimes you just need the white space. I think you don't have to, but... So now I have this pink color and I really just want the tiniest bit of gray for this. So I just put a little gray on my finger and put it in the bottom here, and then it'll just kind of mix in as I mix, and then adding some white. And I usually have like little eyedropper tools that I can drop a little bit of paint at a time in, but who knows where those are. This isn't quite the pink that is in that example. It's definitely got some more orange tones to it, but again, we do what we can with what we have. And because this kind of has like some bluish purple tones to it, it's going to go really well with the colors that we've chosen, so it works. How about here? We don't have anything there yet. Soak some of that up. All right, I'll set these aside and move on to the next. So the next color palette is the one that I found on Pinterest, showing that on the screen now. I really like the top portion of this painting. It kind of has like a gradient with the blue and the yellow and the orange. So that's the goal here. This is going to be a little more bright, but we're going to start with this green light blue color, and I'm definitely mixing white with this. So this is a color that it looks really light as wet paint, but when it dries, it is very vibrant. So I'm not going for like super dark vibrant right now. So I just want to tone it down just a little bit. I'm not going to mix any gray with this one, although it's tempting. I found my little eyedropper tool, so we're just adding little bits of water. I know before I was kind of going real splashy on the backgrounds, but I think for this one, I want this to be a little more smooth. So for this, I'm going to keep it at the top because, again, we're going for that, almost that gradient look. I was like, how did I lose my water bottle? Spraying some of this in here. We'll maybe go at an angle on this paper. And then I'm just gonna move some of this around. That's good. I still want some splashy. And I don't want drip marks, but I do kind of want like a water layer in between, if that makes sense. On the next one, we're going for this Naples yellow. And again, it's a lot darker when it dries than I really want it to be. So I'm mixing about half white, well, a little more than half, I guess. And then that's probably perfect, actually, because this always dries a little darker. And I'm getting the paint to this like consistency first, which I know I explained that before, but before you really start to add a lot of water, It always just helps keep it less clumpy. And that's the goal, right? And the cool thing about using this kind of method is when these paints sort of like mix together, they'll even create more cool colors. Somebody come get their grandma, you know? Sometimes I feel like. Don't worry too much about these mixing. Some of the colors, like you might have seen in these other paintings, were, you know, mixing somewhat more than others. Like that last one with the pink, you're probably not even going to see that pink because of the way that I mix them together. But we can always like enhance the pink on top. I'm kind of tapping. I do still want some splatter marks and stuff like that. For the last color on this is going to be this yellow orange medium. This is also a very vibrant color. So a little bit of white. So one cool thing that you could have done with all of these to give it like a, I don't know, it's sort of like a modern version of bright colors, is to just add a teeny bit of gray to it. And I don't know, it just gives it something. That's my advice if you want to give it something. I don't know. If you want to kind of make all your colors in your color palette even cohesive, like the gray will kind of help put everything in the same general tone. So I've got all three of these color palettes sort of laid out onto their paper or canvas, and then I'm gonna let this layer completely dry on all of these before we add any more layers to the paintings. And the reason that we want to do that is that way we're not mixing and getting our colors muddy, and it just gives it a nice solid background to start with. And you can also see what the colors look like once they are completely dry, because a lot of times they'll change the tone and the darkness. So we want to see what that is before we really start layering colors on top of it. So stay tuned for the next step, which is going to be adding some of the larger blobs of color on top of this, and we'll start to introduce some of those other colors that were in the palettes that you're not necessarily seeing just yet. So I am going through, I have trays of oil pastels, I have like a bucket of markers, I even have colored pencils. So I'm going through these colors and I am just trying to pick out some nice accent colors. I'm thinking, you know, we've got a lot of dark in the background, we can lay some lighter colors on top. So I'm probably gonna get some softer, almost white, off-white type colors. There is a pink and there is a really lighter version of this blue. So maybe that blue we used with a lot of white in it. So that's what we're gonna search for. I know I'm gonna want to use this. I use this strip of fabric to test on. So this is from a painting that I actually made for my mom for Mother's Day, and I was testing all of the different colors of marker and other mark making tools to make sure that they went with the palette that I used. So I'm just gonna take part of this and use it to test. So I know that I really like this Posca slate gray. pen, and that'll be perfect for mark making on both of these. This is kind of a brown oil pastel. You know, I'm testing that out here, and it kind of goes in line with almost exactly this color. So I really want to use that. And then I'll just continue to kind of test these out. I have markers here that might be a bit too orange. So, you know, I typically like to test them before I ever put them to the canvas. You know, I also like to see how, because a lot of times like the whites like this one don't necessarily show up. Like it'll show up on the dark, but also sometimes because this is raw canvas, it won't quite show up as well here, or it'll kind of get absorbed. So a lot of times if I'm going to use like a white, unless it's on paper, I'll probably just use white paint instead of the white marker. So I know I'm gonna skip that. I always have pencils ready because I love these graphite pencils. So we're definitely gonna use that, and I'll just continue to kind of build up my toolbox of mark making tools. This is kind of the array of colors that I went through. I decided against quite a few of them, so we're not gonna be doing these guys. I don't think we're doing this one. This was just another pencil. I don't really want any yellow in this painting, and then I think I nixed that one. So anything without an X on it is really what I have for mark making tools on top of the paint that I plan to use. So that's the process that I use. I'm gonna grab some of that off-white paint, and then I'm thinking we're gonna use some of this like lighter blue, or maybe even this color blue, because it has less of a purple tint to it. This is the off-white that I decided to go. It's called Milky White. It's by Master's Touch. This is literally my favorite color in the world. I use it so much. It is the perfect shade of off-white. So I'm going for like thick paint here. We're just gonna blob it on, and then I'm just gonna take this kind of flat brush and make some strokes, and I'm aiming for just, I'm actually going to layer some paint on top of this, so I want this to kind of be the base for another color. And then the other color that I'm going to work with here is this gray blue color that we were using earlier. I'm going to mix it with a ton of white. And for this one, I'm just gonna kind of use my fingers. But we're going for texture here. Like, I want it to be kind of thick and kind of resting on top of the canvas. Because as you're looking at these pieces, they're going to show a lot of interest by all of the angles that you can see from the different textures, and from, you know, like they're going to be interesting enough to want to get closer and kind of really explore and take a look at them more in detail. Like I said before, I'll be adding some color on top of that off-white. So for now, I'm gonna leave it, but it is kind of a good time to start to make some marks. So I'm putting some of the blue, and this composition is quite random. There is no thought right now. I'm just kind of paying attention to what I like, and making a mark, and then kind of pausing to look at it for a second. I don't want a ton of pink in this, so that's probably it for that. I feel like say here, could use, and actually covering up some of that pink would be great. And I'll probably do the same here. And then I just like to kind of go through and add marks. I know this seems very random, and it kind of is. So that's the fun in it. And now this darker one is going to add a little more contrast. So if we're like trying to draw attention to a specific place on the painting, you know, we're kind of going to where maybe this would help shape some of that composition and also enhance, you know, some of what we have going on already. between this and the pencil, I think, you know, it kind of adds its own bit of contrast and draws the eye to those darker spots. And I love these graphite pencils, so they're in pretty much every piece of work that I make. I know this looks crazy right now, and we'll kind of bring it together with some of that other top layers that we're gonna finish this piece off with here in just a minute. I'm gonna get a hairdryer and kind of throw some heat on this and dry some of this paint real quick, and then we'll lay like the last layer on that, and then this set will actually be complete. So these aren't completely dry. In fact, these blue blobs are still kind of very wet, but this is dry enough that I can touch it, and it's not really coming off on my hand. That's paint from earlier. So I'm gonna go back in and mess with these spots here. So I have this plate. I have this color from earlier on the other painting. This is the teal green. I've got a palette knife. This is just a plastic palette knife. And the only reason I'm using this instead of a brush is I don't really want to disrupt that off-white color too much. So I thought maybe scraping brush bristles through it would cause an issue, but this might be a little too green. I'm gonna add some of this blue to it and more white. Okay, I like this a lot more. It's still got a lot of green to it, but also with the blue that I added, I think it'll go really nicely. And this is just adding just on top that layer. Okay, so that's that. I also got an idea to darken some of these spots a little bit more. Add a little more of contrast to and I like to add a little water just to kind of blend that out into the canvas. Okay, so these two blue paintings are pretty much finished. I'm going to set them aside and let them dry, and we'll get started on the next set. So this next set was based off of this color palette, and the colors that I'm going to collect for this are going to be some more of the pink, probably also in that same shade of pink that I used for the last painting, and then I'll probably continue to add some white to this to kind of get this grayish color, and then I have some markers so for that green, and this green actually dries pretty dark, so that'll kind of be representative of this green here, the pink, and then I'm gonna find a color that's close to this orangey brown. I got interrupted and I was testing out colors, so I paused the video and I was kind of working through that, but here's what I landed on. We are going with this color, not this color, not this color, not these colors, not these colors, not this color, this one, and then this here and this marker here. So we've got all of those colors ready to go. I even have some of that leftover paint because we do have, you know, some of like the darker teal. I know we have some of that mixed in with the water, but I think, you know, using the paint that we have already mixed would be great. And I think we have all of the mark making tools we need to get started on this. So I'm thinking right off the bat that I want to take the pink that we originally used and kind of brighten that up a little bit because frankly it didn't really show up too well. I know I mixed it with gray before, but now we have like those hints of this grayish pink in here, and I think that this pop of bright pink will look really cool. Especially right by the grays and where the pink already is, it sort of brings it out a little bit. Get some water mixed in here. So if I scoop some out and toss it on there, kind of goes a little better. kind of like the way that went. I'm kind of wanting to take some of this green that I was using and throw that on top too, just because I have so much of it. And I think it'll be like a nice contrast to what I just put on there. And then with this color, I just really want it to be like a small accent, but I love like the marks and doing more like squiggle lines through it, and then also thickening some of those spots. All right, and then I know this is chaos, but all my paintings are. And usually if I go bigger, there's a little more, a little less chaos to it. Like I have way more room to work and okay. Oh, I ripped my paper. That's okay. Texture, right? I just feel like there needs to be some lightness to this. I think those two are done. I'm going to set these two aside and we'll get to working on the next two. I have these two paintings, which originally were based off of this painting that I found on Pinterest. I can't credit the artist. I have no idea who made it. It was on one of those like sites where you can have prints made of it. So, and they did not credit the artist. So I have no idea who it is. I have some light yellows, like a darker yellow. I have this kind of magenta, like a deeper purple, going for tones in each one of these. And in that image, you know, at the bottom, there were some deeper purples and things like that. I've got some oil pastels in pink, and I even kind of did an in-between color. I'm gonna try to keep the gradient situation going on. I still have the off-white on hand just in case. And then I have this light pink color and this kind of magenta color. It's blue-violet, but here it looks very much like just magenta. And this one's a little less planned in my head. We'll see how this ends up. But I think I'm gonna start by adding some marks with like the yellow. And I have a couple shades of yellow here. This isn't a yellow that I use very often, but I thought that they would really look cool together. So that one is not showing up very well. And then start to lay down those thicker paints on top. So I'm not trying to paint through them white the way I did it before. Now, this color is such a pretty deep purple. It's hard to tell in the camera, but it is like, I don't know, it's just like a pretty reddish purple. So I'm gonna dry these layers, and then I'm thinking of putting like a really light kind of yellow on some of this, especially in here, just to kind of cover up a lot of that extreme contrast. And then from there, I think I'm good. We'll see how that goes. All right, so I've got this kind of yellow color mixed up, and I'm just gonna lay that in some of these really dark spots, I think. And even up in here. That's kind of the stopping point I like on these two paintings. So hopefully you got a really good understanding of like layering and trying to build composition and my process really. I'm definitely leaning more toward liking the blue pieces that we made and their paper versions, which are still drying. Really what we did is we made 3 different versions of kind of toying around with color and different color palettes and creating studies. You know, basically what I do with these is I'll save them for inspiration later. If I love them enough, I will build more paintings out of them. I will give them away, I'll sell them. I do all kinds of stuff with my studies, but this is just a fun way to actually play around and kind of make a real painting, a complete painting, but on smaller pieces. So I hope you enjoyed going through this process with me, and I hope you try it out. I hope you enjoyed painting with me today. I had a lot of fun. It definitely helps me release a lot of that built up stress and energy that I've been going through this week. So thank you for joining me. We really created some amazing, beautiful pieces. It's just a way for you to play around and enjoy making without any kind of stress or pressure of having to do something with it or sell it or anything like that. So as you know, my name is Jen Sanders. I'm an abstract artist and I love sharing videos like this. If you enjoyed this video, definitely go ahead and hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you think. Did you get the chance to make your own studies? Did you paint along with me? And I'd love to hear from you more in the future. Thank you.